John Dillinger. On July 22, 1934, in Chicago, Illinois, a bank robber named John Dillinger woke up in a brothel where he had been hiding for 2 weeks after spending 14 months robbing 24 banks across 4 states. The woman who owned the brothel was Anna Sage, a Romanian immigrant facing deportation, and she had decided that morning to sell Dillinger to the FBI. Anna walked to a payphone 2 blocks from her brothel, called the FBI office, and told Agent Melvin Purvis that she would deliver America's most wanted criminal to them that night if they helped her stay in the country. Purvis agreed and told Anna to wear a bright red dress when she took Dillinger out in public so his agents could spot her in a crowd. That evening, Anna told Dillinger she wanted to watch a movie, put on her red dress, and walk with him to the Biograph Theater. At 8:30 p.m., Dillinger and Anna bought tickets to watch Manhattan Melodrama, a gangster film where the criminal ends up dead. While they sat in the dark theater watching the movie, 16 FBI agents surrounded the building, hiding in doorways, crouching on rooftops, and standing across Lincoln Avenue with their guns already drawn. At 10:40 p.m., the movie ended, and Dillinger walked out with Anna, whose red dress glowed under the theater's bright lights like a target. FBI agent Melvin Purvis saw the red dress, pulled out a cigar, struck a match, and lit it as a signal for his agents to close in. Dillinger saw Purvis's face, then spotted agents stepping out from doorways and running toward him from both sides, and he turned and sprinted toward an alley while reaching for the gun in his pocket. 3 FBI agents fired 5 shots, and 1 bullet entered the back of Dillinger's neck, ripped through his spinal cord, tore through his brain, and exited below his right eye. Dillinger dropped face first onto the sidewalk, blood pouring from the wound onto Lincoln Avenue. The next day, the Cook County morgue displayed Dillinger's corpse behind glass, and 15,000 people waited in line to stare at his body. The FBI spent more money hunting Dillinger than he had stolen from all 24 banks. Anna received $5,000 from the FBI, but was deported to Romania 2 years later anyway, where someone murdered her in 1947. Andrew Cunanan. On July 23, 1997, in Miami Beach, Florida, a 27-year-old serial killer named Andrew Cunanan was hiding on a houseboat after murdering 5 people in 3 months, including fashion designer Gianni Versace, and the FBI had spent 8 days searching the island for him. Andrew was a gay gigolo with an IQ of 147 who had been living off wealthy older men until his life fell apart that spring, and he became the FBI's most wanted fugitive after his final victim made him famous worldwide. The houseboat where Andrew was hiding belonged to a German man who was out of the country, and that morning, the houseboat's caretaker, Fernando Carrera, arrived to check on the property with his wife. Fernando noticed the front door had been forced open, pushed it wider, and saw lights on inside with a pair of sandals sitting next to the sofa. Fernando pulled a gun from his waistband and took a step forward when he heard a loud gunshot from the 2nd floor. Upstairs in the bedroom, Andrew had heard Fernando enter, grabbed the same gun he had used to kill Gianni Versace 8 days earlier, put the barrel in his mouth, and pulled the trigger. Fernando and his wife ran out of the houseboat and called the police, who arrived within minutes with SWAT teams and helicopters and surrounded the boat. For 4 hours, SWAT teams fired tear gas canisters and flashbang grenades through the windows before 8 officers in black body armor stormed inside and climbed the stairs to the bedroom. They found Andrew's body lying on a bed with blood pooled around his head, the gun still in his hand, and his eyes wide open staring at the ceiling. Andrew left no suicide note and never told anyone why he murdered 5 people, taking his reasons to the grave. The FBI had launched the largest manhunt in American history, with thousands of agents searching Miami Beach for 8 days. But Andrew had been hiding on a houseboat just 3 miles from Versace's mansion the entire time, watching television coverage of the search. Christopher Wilder. On April 13, 1984, in Colebrook, New Hampshire, a wealthy race car driver named Christopher Wilder pulled into a gas station just 8 miles from the Canadian border after a 6-week killing spree across 16 states. Christopher was a construction millionaire from Florida who posed as a fashion photographer and lured women with modeling offers before torturing them with electrical shocks and superglue. Christopher raced Porsches at the Miami Grand Prix and used his wealth and status as a race car driver to appear legitimate while hunting victims. Christopher approached women at shopping malls with cameras and modeling contracts, and once they got into his car, he would drive them to motels where he would beat them, blow dry superglue into their eyes to blind them, and attach electrical wires to their feet before shocking them repeatedly. The FBI had added Christopher to their 10 most wanted list after he murdered 9 women across 16 states in 47 days, and 2 state troopers at the gas station recognized him immediately. State troopers Leo Jellison and Wayne Fortier approached Christopher's car, and Christopher reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a Colt Point .357 Magnum revolver. Leo dove through the car window on top of Christopher and grabbed him from behind, and during the struggle over the gun, Christopher fired 2 shots almost simultaneously. The first bullet entered Christopher's chest, passed completely through his body, exited out his back, and hit Leo in the ribs. The second bullet hit Christopher in the chest and killed him instantly, and he collapsed on the ground next to the gas pump while Leo stumbled backward, clutching his ribs. Paramedics arrived minutes later and pronounced Christopher dead at the scene, and they rushed Leo to the hospital. Investigators later determined that Christopher had been trying to shoot Leo during the struggle, but both bullets accidentally hit Christopher instead, killing him instantly. Leo recovered from his gunshot wound and received $2,600 from Christopher's $1 million estate, while the families of Christopher's 9 victims split the rest. Robert Mathews. On December 8, 1984, in Greenbank, Washington, 75 FBI agents surrounded a waterfront vacation home on Whidbey Island, where a 31-year-old white supremacist named Robert Mathews had barricaded himself inside with a submachine gun. Robert had founded a neo-Nazi terrorist group called The Order that had robbed a Brinks armored truck of $3.6 million in California and murdered a Jewish radio host in Denver. The FBI had been hunting him for months. While hiding on Whidbey Island, Robert had written a declaration of war against the United States government and told his followers he would never surrender. FBI agents fired dozens of smoke grenades through the windows to force Robert out, but he simply put on a gas mask and continued firing his submachine gun from the upstairs windows at the agents below. At 6:30 p.m. on Saturday evening, a Navy helicopter flew over the house, and an agent inside fired 3 M79 illumination flares through the roof into the interior. The flares hit a box of hand grenades and Robert's ammunition stockpile on the floor, and the entire pile exploded in a massive fireball that blew out the windows and turned the house into an inferno. Flames spread across the walls and ceiling as the house filled with smoke, but Robert continued firing his submachine gun out the upstairs window at the FBI agents on the ground. The fire grew larger, and the sky above the house turned bright orange and red as the flames consumed the structure, and Robert kept firing automatic bursts from the window. The gunfire from the window suddenly stopped, and the house collapsed into a pile of burning rubble as the FBI agents watched from behind their vehicles. On Sunday morning, FBI agents walked through the smoking ruins and found Robert's charred body lying next to a bathtub with a pistol still gripped in his hand. The medical examiner identified Robert's body using dental records and determined he had died from smoke inhalation with no bullet wounds, meaning he had chosen to burn alive rather than surrender. Ayman al-Zawahiri. On July 31, 2022, at 6:18 a.m. in the Sherpur neighborhood of downtown Kabul, Afghanistan, a 71-year-old Egyptian physician named Ayman al-Zawahiri stepped onto the third-floor balcony of a safe house and stood alone looking over the city. Ayman was the leader of al-Qaeda who had co-planned the September 11th, 2001 attacks that killed nearly 3,000 Americans, and the CIA had been hunting him for 21 years with a $25 million reward on his head. In early 2022, the CIA had tracked Ayman's wife, daughter, and grandchildren when they moved to the Kabul safe house, and months later discovered that Ayman had joined them to reunite with his family. The CIA monitored the house for months and discovered that Ayman never left the building, but appeared alone on the third-floor balcony every morning around 6:15 a.m., where he would stand and sometimes read. At 6:18 a.m. on July 31st, a CIA drone hovering above Kabul fired 2 Hellfire R-9X missiles at Ayman as he stood on the balcony, and the missiles deployed 6 razor-sharp blades that sliced through him without exploding. The R-9X missiles were nicknamed Flying Ginsu bombs because they used spinning blades instead of explosives to kill targets with precision while avoiding civilian casualties. The blades hit Ayman on the balcony and killed him instantly, while his wife, daughter, and grandchildren remained unharmed inside the house below. The missiles blew out the windows on the 3rd floor, but left the rest of the building intact with no fire or explosion, and neighbors heard only a loud bang. 2 days later, on August 1st, President Joe Biden announced from the White House that Ayman al-Zawahiri was dead and said justice has been delivered for the 9/11 attacks. Ayman al-Zawahiri had survived 21 years of drone strikes, manhunts, and hiding in caves across Afghanistan and Pakistan, only to be killed on his own balcony because he wanted to enjoy his morning routine with his family in Kabul. Whitey Bulger. On June 22, 2011, in Santa Monica, California, FBI agents arrested 81-year-old James Whitey Bulger after a 16-year manhunt. James was the boss of Boston's Winter Hill Gang and had murdered at least 11 people while running loan sharking, bookmaking, and extortion operations across the city from the 1970s through 1994. James had secretly served as an FBI informant from 1975 to 1990, feeding information about rival gangs to his handler John Connolly, while his crew murdered witnesses and buried them in hidden graves. A tipster recognized James's girlfriend from a televised appeal and led FBI agents to apartment 303 in Santa Monica, where they arrested him, living with 30 guns and $822,000 in cash hidden in the walls. 5 years into his sentence, prison officials transferred the 89-year-old James in a wheelchair from USP Coleman to USP Hazleton in Brewston Mills, West Virginia, where 2 inmates had been murdered in the previous 7 months. Inmates and over 100 prison staff knew James was arriving that evening, and several inmates placed bets on how long the famous FBI informant would survive in the general population. James arrived at USP Hazleton at 8:30 p.m. on October 29th, and prison guards wheeled him into cell 132, where he spent the night alone. At 6 a.m. on October 30th, cell doors across the unit unlocked for breakfast, and 3 inmates immediately gathered outside cell 132. Fotios Freddie Gies, a 51-year-old mafia hitman serving life for murdering a mob boss, and Paul DeCologero, a 48-year-old gangster, entered James's cell, while Sean McKinnon sat at a nearby table as lookout. Freddie and Paul grabbed James from his wheelchair, dragged him to a corner outside the view of surveillance cameras, and beat him repeatedly in the head and face with a padlock stuffed inside a sock. The 2 men struck James in the head over and over for 7 minutes, and they attempted to gouge out his eyes with their fingers as symbolic punishment for being an FBI informant. After 7 minutes, Freddie and Paul covered James's bloodied body with blankets, placed him back in his bunk, and returned to their cells at 6:13 a.m. Prison guards discovered James unresponsive in his bunk at 8:07 a.m. with blood covering his head and face, and they attempted CPR but pronounced him dead at 9:04 a.m. An autopsy revealed James had died from blunt force trauma to his head, and authorities described the 89-year-old's face as unrecognizable. Gordon Kahl. On February 13, 1983, in Medina, North Dakota, U.S. Marshals set up a roadblock to arrest 63-year-old Gordon Kahl as he left an anti-government meeting at the Medina Medical Clinic. Gordon was a decorated World War II bomber crew veteran who had turned into a religious extremist, writing to the IRS in 1967 that he would no longer pay taxes to what he called the Synagogue of Satan. Gordon became the Texas coordinator for Posse Comitatus, an armed extremist group that rejected federal authority and believed only county sheriffs were legitimate law enforcement. In 1976, Gordon was convicted of tax evasion and served 1 year in federal prison. But by February 1983, he had violated his probation again, and U.S. Marshals decided to arrest him at the Medina meeting. Gordon left the meeting with his son Yori and 3 other armed posse members, and both Gordon and Yori carried Ruger Mini 14 rifles as they drove toward the roadblock a few miles north. A shootout erupted at the roadblock where Gordon killed 2 U.S. Marshals before fleeing North Dakota, leaving his wounded son behind to be arrested. For 4 months, Gordon evaded a massive FBI manhunt by hiding in a network of white supremacist safe houses across Texas and Arkansas, while his son Yori was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. On June 3, 1983, a tip led FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, Arkansas State Police, and local deputies to a fortified house near Smithville, Arkansas, where Gordon had been hiding in a bunker-like basement. Lawrence County Sheriff Gene Mathews entered the house with 2 other officers, and as Mathews walked into the kitchen, Gordon emerged from behind a refrigerator, and both men fired simultaneously. Gordon's shot struck Mathews in the chest and penetrated his heart, while Mathews fired a single-point 4.1 Magnum round that hit Gordon in the head and killed him instantly. Mathews stumbled out of the house, gasped, "I got him," to other officers, then collapsed and died from blood loss, while authorities outside, unaware Gordon was already dead, fired thousands of rounds into the house. Officers poured diesel fuel down the chimney and set the house on fire, which burned for 2 hours before they found Gordon's charred body with a bullet in his skull. Osama bin Laden. On May 2, 2011, in Abbottabad, Pakistan, 23 Navy SEALs flew 2 Black Hawk helicopters toward a compound to kill Osama bin Laden, whose face had been on FBI most wanted posters across America for 12 years. Osama had trained 19 al-Qaeda members and sent them to America, where they boarded planes on September 11, 2001, flew them into the Twin Towers and Pentagon, killing 2,977 people. After September 11th, American soldiers swept through Tora Bora's cave networks in Afghanistan with flashlights and rifles. But Osama slipped across the Pakistani border on foot with bodyguards and disappeared. For nearly 10 years, Osama vanished, until in August 2010, CIA teams followed his courier Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti as he drove into a compound surrounded by 18-foot walls, less than 1 mile from where Pakistani military officers jogged past every morning. At 1 a.m., 2 Black Hawk helicopters descended toward the compound, and one crashed through the 18-foot wall, forcing SEALs to blast gates open with explosives. The SEALs shot Osama's courier, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, when he appeared in the guesthouse doorway with an AK-47, then stormed the main building and climbed the stairwell, where they shot his son Khalid coming down toward them. On the 3rd floor, a SEAL kicked the bedroom door open and saw a tall man in a white robe reaching for an AK-47 beside the bed, raised his rifle, and fired twice, hitting Osama in the chest and above the left eye. The bullet blew out his eyeball and shattered part of his skull, and the SEAL pressed his radio and transmitted "Geronimo Ekia" to President Obama watching from the White House. The SEALs wrapped the body, flew it to the USS Carl Vinson, and sailors slid it into the Arabian Sea within 24 hours. President Obama walked to a podium and announced Osama bin Laden was dead, and thousands of Americans poured into the streets outside the White House and at Ground Zero, waving flags and chanting USA. In February 2012, Pakistani bulldozers demolished the compound, the same government that had claimed for years they never knew the world's most wanted terrorist lived 1 mile from their military academy.